Welcome to the quick guide to Warlord Zon'ozz on Heroic. This boss will for most people be a big roadblock on their way through Dragon Soul, and is in my opinion one of the harder bosses in the raid, especially for 10 man, despite being one of the first bosses in the raid tier. For this boss, you want to bring 1 tank on 10 man and 2 on 25 man. You want to bring 3 healers on 10 man and 6 to 7 healers on 25 man. Yes, this boss is very healing intensive, and we'll go through why and how to make life a little bit easier in just a bit. While class stacking is less needed in 10 man, bringing several fire mages or shadow priest will help you a lot in 25 man. The boss is 1 main phase and 1 intermission phase, and as a rather unique concept, you as a raid has complete control over when those intermissions happen instead of being based on the boss HP or on a specific timer. But before we get to the intermission, let's talk about the main phase. In this phase, we'll have to deal with 4 mechanics. First is a frontal cone ability called Psychic Drain. This will target your tank and deal damage to anyone in front of him. As such, phase the boss away from the raid for the majority of the fight. There's only one exception to this rule, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Psychic Drain deals a fair amount of damage and it's not too deadly on its own. However, you want to aim to have a decent defensive rolling at each of the drains for 2 reasons. 1. A drain in combination with a big melee swing can be quite fatal. 2. The boss heals for 10 times the amount of damage the boss deals with this ability, and using a cooldown like AMS, Wall, Mirror Broken Images will reduce the healing the boss gets. His second ability is Focus Anger, and this is a stacking damage buff that keeps increasing his physical damage done by 20% plus 5% attack speed per stack. This buff keeps ramping over time and gets higher and higher the longer you spend in his main phase, and is the reason why tanks should aim to use strong defensive cooldowns towards the end of the phase before the stacks get cleared as you enter the intermission. His third mechanic is Disrupting Shadows. This is a debuff that gets placed on 1 to 3 people on 10 man and 6 to 7 people on 25 man. This will deal high taking damage unless it's dispelled. Be careful because it deals AoE damage when it's dispelled. So on 10 man, make sure you run out of the group to dispel it. On 25 man, it becomes way too chaotic to actually dispel it, so we opted to simply leave it on anyone already in melee, and if the debuff runs out without being dispelled, it won't do a knockback and deal AoE damage. Targets already spread out at range, you'll of course dispel as soon as possible. It is however important to time your intermissions with this buff as to not have it up as you're transitioning the boss. His last and most important mechanic is Void of the Unmaking. This spawns a big orb that will deal split damage to anyone he makes contact with before rolling away in the opposite direction. Each time the ball bounces, then it will have a cooldown of 5 seconds before it can be bounced again, increasing the damage of the next bounce by 20%, as well as leaving a debuff on the boss increasing the damage taken by 5%. If the ball hits a wall, then it is a wipe. If the ball hits the boss, then you trigger the intermission. You'd ideally like to take as many bounces as possible and not simply transition the boss over and over. The enrage timer is way too unforgiving, and playing around these orbs will determine in whether or not you're successful in completing the encounter. On 10 man, the simplest and most effective strategy is to simply form 1 range camp and 1 melee camp and bounce the ball between those camps before having the melee move away in order to trigger the intermission by having the ball hit the boss. On 25 man, however, we found it more effective to have everyone but a few soakers stand in melee. These soakers would take turns bouncing the ball depending on whether they had Cauterize as a fire mage or Dispersion as a shadow priest available. On 25 man, you want to have 5 bounces in range during the first phase, so make sure your comp can accommodate for that. Okay, let's talk about the intermission. After you bounce the ball into Zon'ozz, he'll run towards the middle of the room where he'll stay for roughly 12 seconds before he starts attacking the tank again. This phase lasts for 30 seconds, and during the entire phase, you'll take ticking AoE damage from Black Blood of Gorath. The damage on its own is not too bad, but on Heroic, the boss will spawn 8 tentacles on 10 man and 14 tentacles on 25 man. Each of these tentacles, when alive, adds a stack to the AoE damage, and as such, the healing requirements at the beginning of the phase becomes really high. There are 3 different kinds of adds. The big claws have the highest health and need to be tanked. 1 of these spawns on 10 man and 2 on 25 man, and is the reason why you need 2 tanks for this encounter. These are the lowest kill priority. Second add are the eyes, and 5 of these spawn on 10 man and on 25 man. These do a targeted beam on a random raid member and deals a fair amount of damage. These ads, despite not having a cast bar, can be silenced and interrupted. Once the ad starts kinda hunching over, that means that it's casting and can be interrupted. The last ads are the flails, of which you'll have 2 on 10 man and 4 on 25 man. These are your highest kill priority as they have very little health and can be quite dangerous if left alive. They'll periodically do a small AoE knockback to anyone in melee. But if no one is in melee, they'll do an AoE spit on the raid, which hurts a lot when combined with everything else going on in that phase. It is worth keeping in mind that while the phase itself lasts for 30 seconds, the orb that he spawns in his normal phase is on a stationary 1.5 minute cooldown. So the longer time you spend in the normal phase, the less time you'll have to clean up the ads before the next orb spawns. Alright, so let's walk through how to actually play the fight. As you begin the fight, run in and have your tank face the raid with the boss. Spawn the orb, and then turn the boss away and drag it a few yards away. In this phase, take 7 bounces on 10 man and 9 on 25 man. The 9 bounces on 25 man is primarily to line up the timer of the debuff so you don't have an active debuff going into the transition. After you let the orb hit the boss, split up into 2 sections on 10 man and 2 or 4 on 25 man with a tank on each claw. Each section should be centered around getting down the flails as quickly as possible with eyes to follow. Coordinate strong defensive cooldowns during this phase and front load them during the portion where all ads are alive. The incoming damage mellows out quite quickly after a few ads die. On screen right now, you'll have spawn locations for all ads on 10 man as well as assignments of who goes where. This phase is very unforgiving on 10 man, so take some time to really figure out assignments for this phase. On screen right now, you'll have the spawn locations for all of the ads on 25 man, including assignments of who goes where. Keep in mind that there are many strats to deal with this phase, including one strat where everyone stacks up as a wrecking ball to make a lap around the whole room, but I think the best strat is either to send one group north and south or have 4 quadrants to maximize damage output on the ads. Once all the flails are dead, along with the off-tank claw on 25 man, go back to the boss and get ready for the main phase. The claw on the main tank will just be cleaved down as you're getting ready for the next orb. Don't bother going back to the middle of the room with the boss. Simply stay at the claw location, face the boss towards the middle to spawn the orb, then proceed like normal. During this phase, take 5 bounces on 10 man and 7 on 25 man. Transition the boss, play the intermission, go back to the normal phase, and now you'll be in the 3rd main phase. Now, this is the moment we'll have to take a moment to have some introspection and know whether you are gamers or not. With really high DPS, you can use this moment to push for the kill in this phase. In that case, take 5 to 7 bounces, pop Lust towards the execute, transition the boss, and nuke the boss while stacking up as a raid while your tanks run out to the claws. If you're not a gamer group, like mine in this 10 man, you do 5 bounces on 10 man and 7 on 25 man and play another intermission phase before you lust and nuke the boss. And that's it. Learn the intermission, handle the ball, use cooldowns on tank, and collect loot. And that's how you kill Warlord Zon'ozz on Heroic. Subscribe for more quick guides and click the link on the screen right now to watch the rest of the guides from Dragon Soul.